Thanks again for joining our webinar this afternoon on data pipeline strategy. We are going to go ahead and get started. The webinar is being recorded, so it will be available afterwards for anyone who does join late or isn't able to join us. So I'd like to give you a little bit of background on what we're going to be covering today during the webinar. So to do that, I've got a little bit of an agenda here. We're going to go through some introductions and a short overview of Technion and who we are and what we do. We're going to talk a little bit about the rest of the data pipeline webinar series, as this is our introductory session. We're going to be in this webinar talking about business strategy, how that relates to data and analytics strategy, and then what it looks like to develop a data pipeline strategy specifically that supports that. We're going to be looking at several examples of modern data pipeline strategies that we see and help companies implement. And then we'll follow up with questions and so on. All right, so diving right in. Just from an introduction standpoint, my name is Jonathan Agee. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Technion Data Solutions. I've been with the company now for 13 years and have the privilege of working with a really awesome team here at Technion. So who is Technion? I like to say that we are technology-driven data experts. We believe in two core technology values under that technology-driven focus. One being leveraging automation, and the second being enabling self-service. We believe that these are absolutely core for any data and analytics strategy to be successful and to deliver the highest value. We have a really fantastic team of data experts. You can see here our core values as a team: being servants, an inquisitive mind, and a humble confidence. Really fantastic team here at Technion. So what do we do? Our services start with strategy, what we're talking about today. How and why should you do things the way you do them? Then we have our client solutions, which I'll chat about a little bit more here. We also do training. We support our customers with training around products and the expertise that they need to succeed in data and analytics. And then we work with them around advocacy and enablement of how to implement solutions and leverage those solutions across the entirety of their organization, not just in the groups that we work with. So let's focus in a little bit more on our client solutions. We work with companies to help them from an end-to-end standpoint with their data and analytics. We've broken that down into four key areas. Data pipelines, which we're going to be talking a lot more about today, is one of our key focuses. It's everything to do with getting the data ready for consumption, ready for the value that it can provide. Data science, getting into predictive analytics, geospatial, machine learning, and AI. Visual analytics. We have a heavy focus on how data should be presented and providing the tools and the capabilities to organizations in order to do that. And then our legacy from how the company was actually founded was on the custom applications and the integration capabilities that we can bring to the table. And so we still carry that legacy forward today with a focus around integrated apps that bring data and analytics into the everyday working space of every individual in an organization. Just a little bit more about Technion. Something that's very important to us is for folks to understand our mission and our passion. Our mission, we believe in serving others by helping them unlock hidden truths buried in their data. And there's a few key words in this. Service, you've already heard me say. We believe in truth. We believe that there is truth hidden in data and that it's our responsibility to help folks identify and find that truth through data. Our passion as a company is to give back. We believe in serving the community And we take that as a deep responsibility to bring our capabilities and our talents and our money and services to those who need it the most in our communities. One more thing, and I mentioned our awesome team already, but our team has been recognized by our partners and by our customers for bringing the expertise that we do to the table year after year. So you can see some of those examples where we have been named Partner of the Year by key ones of our partners. And there are many stories that we can tell of customers who have recognized Technion for our contributions to them. So that's enough about Technion. I want to shift now to our topic. But before that, I want to give a little bit of a preview of our data pipeline webinar series that this is the kickoff of. So you can see that's happening today. In March, we will be focusing on data wellness and quality, along with showcasing Validator, which is a automated data QA tool here at Technion. In April, we'll be sharing with you more about Matillion, which is an ELT platform native to the cloud for cloud data warehousing. In May, we will be focusing on Data Vault and understanding what is it and how does it work in relation to your classic Kimball solution, your data warehouse that you're used to. And alongside that, we'll be focusing on automation and talking about Warescape as a data warehouse automation platform. In June, we'll be focusing in on probably one of the hottest tools in the market, and that is Snowflake, which is a cloud data warehouse platform. And then in August, we'll be carrying that cloud conversation forward to really talk about an entire cloud strategy and how that's going to impact your data pipeline. And then in September, we'll be looking at another one of our partners, and that is Fivetran, which is a connector company, also carrying forward the cloud conversation. We may be adding more webinars into the mix here, but that's what we have planned so far. So just a note about today we're really talking at a high level about strategy, and we're not going to get into a lot of these tool conversations, but those are definitely conversations that we love to have. And so as you can see, that's going to be a lot of the follow-up is going to be some conversations around the nuts and bolts of what it looks like to choose tools and identify which ones of those are going to be successful for your specific data pipeline strategy. I want to start off today with a question that I think is really important that organizations be asking themselves. Any data and analytics leader in an organization should be considering this question. And that is your data and analytics strategy directly supporting your core business strategy? And I want to tease this out a little bit. We're going to talk about business strategy and what I mean by that. But this is a question that we help organizations explore through our strategic data assessment offering when we engage with them. At the end of the webinar, we're going to talk a little bit more about what that strategic data assessment is. But my goal for you today is to help you think specifically about how your data pipeline strategy can support or detract from your organization's core business strategy. So if this is a conversation that spurs some thinking on your behalf, I'd love to have the opportunity to have that conversation continue. So don't hesitate to reach out if that's the case. So what do I mean by business strategies? And this is going back to your business classes, those sorts of things. But when you think about business strategy, ultimately the question is, how is an organization going to win at what they are doing? And I think there's some key things to think about here, right? What is your strategic advantage? Maybe another word would be competitive advantage that you're going to bring to bear. And then where are you going to do that in the market, right? Is that going to be industry-wide or in a particular segment? And so I think this is a helpful visual. But I want to call out 4 key business strategies that I think are are important to think about, and then talk a little bit about some examples of this. So you have an operational excellence business strategy. And this would really be getting into that low-cost provider, right? You're going to excel in driving down costs and delivering, being the low-cost competitor in the market. You have companies where a business strategy would be product or process innovation, right? Being able to really focus in on that differentiation, something that makes you unique, and you're the only one that has it. You can all think of lots of examples of companies that probably focus on that sort of as a business strategy. Another business strategy, really more in the focus area, on the bottom of the chart there, is customer intimacy. And so this would be knowing your customer very well, having that relationship with them so that they always are going to come to you first because they know that you can provide them a high level of value because you know them. And one more that's a little bit interesting to think about, but is very powerful, is the idea of risk management. And the way to think about this as a business strategy is that some organizations have a unique ability to assess risk, price risk, and manage risk in such a way that that itself becomes a differentiator. And they're able, I think mainly through, because their cost for risk is lower, be a leader in that regard and provide different or innovative products related to risk. So that's what I mean by business strategy. So I'd like to say that I think that it's an organization's data and analytics strategy should have as its central goal, not its only goal, but its central goal, to the strengthening of its ability to execute on its business strategy. So let's kind of unpack that a little bit. What do I mean by this concept? Let's take, for example, one of those business strategies. Let's say you are a cost competitor, right? You have a low cost business strategy. You're in that operational excellence category. It is imperative that the data and analytics strategy support the key processes where cost is found in your organization around the production of your product. So if you are a manufacturer, that might be addressing your supply chain and ensuring that you can continue to maintain a low cost supply chain and efficiency in that. And your data and analytics strategy should be set up, designed to specifically support that part of the business first and foremost. It will have other ancillary goals, and that's great. And you're still going to have to invest in sales and marketing, and you're still going to need to understand sales and marketing, but you really have to have that core around your central business strategy. So I think that's a helpful example, hopefully, for folks to start thinking about what does it mean for data and analytics to support that? Well, you can imagine the ramifications of that. So what do we mean by data pipelines? I've been using data and analytics broadly, but we've subsectioned off data pipelines. And I want to talk about what the role of the data pipeline is. And we believe that the data pipelines in an organization gather, govern, document, and deliver data to the various end states that support the successful execution of that broader data and analytics strategy. And so when you think about that, I think there's some really important things to pull out of this. The data pipeline is everything that goes into getting the data ready for whatever format it needs to be for an end user to be able to consume it, whether that end user is a person running a report or whether that end user is actually more of a process that is going to do a predictive analytics process or a machine that's going to run a certain program or algorithm based on that. So that's what we're talking about when we speak to data pipelines. This is a big area. There's lots that happens in data pipelines. So what I want to go to next is, what does it look like to develop your data pipeline strategy? And what are the things that you should consider? What is your process for developing that strategy? And what should you expect to produce out of this? So we talked a little bit about business strategy. I believe that business strategy should absolutely be a key input in defining your data pipeline strategy. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking after this about your data inputs and sources, different types of data, how those would impact your different selection of a data pipeline strategy. We'll talk a little bit about uses of data, talk about those end states that are required to support the different uses of data. And then different strategies for your data pipelines are going to be more or less feasible depending on the particular laws and regulations associated with your organization, your industry that you're delivering solutions and products in. Certainly, what data pipeline strategy is successful in your organization is going to depend on the people and the culture of your organization and what skills they have, what capabilities they bring to the table, and what the culture is around the value of data or the approach to who should have access to it. Many different ways that culture and people are going to impact your data pipeline strategy. Obviously, the next level granular detail comes into budget and timelines. What are you trying to accomplish? And how much money do you have to do it? What is the ROI and the value proposition of doing that will fund that budget? And so that's something that is going to be highly unique to every individual organization. And then everyone has a certain set of technology available. Some organizations have a lot of technology already available. Others have very little. And so that's going to be another factor in understanding what kind of data pipeline strategy may be successful in my organization. Today, we're not really going to talk about budget and timeline and getting into the technology. As I said, the technology, we're going to have more of those conversations in follow-up webinars. And the budget and timeline is so specific to any organization, any one organization, that we want to have those types of conversations directly, and we can give advice and ideas of how you can approach budget and timeline if that's something you're interested in. So what is the process then that you ought to move through in terms of developing the strategy? And this is the same process that we use in our strategic data assessment. But I wanted to share it with you so that you can understand, how you might be able to do this, or if this is a process that you would want to take your organization through, with some help potentially from the partner. So in the discovery phase of your strategy development, really you're going and gathering information about all of these inputs that we've talked about. And that discovery typically should involve a lot of interviews, a lot of meetings with the stakeholders who are responsible for the business strategy, the sources of data, the uses of data, and certainly legal and security and all those sorts of things. And of course, understanding parameters like budget and timeline and things like that. Once you've done that discovery, and this is truly an iterative process, this is not fully sequential, but discovery will lead into being able to digest and analyze the information that you have gathered. And that may require you to then go back and do more discovery in order to flesh out your understanding of what will be a good strategy. Once you've started to digest it and analyze the situation in your organization, then you're able to begin developing recommendations around which strategy, what your strategy specifically should look like for data pipelines. And of course, as you develop recommendations, it is imperative to cultivate buy-in with those stakeholders that we talked about up in the discovery phase, so that they understand what they could expect to receive in return for the investment in a data pipeline strategy, and ultimately to get approval for moving forward. What I want to talk a little bit more about here is what are the outputs that you should expect from this process of developing a data pipeline strategy. And these are not exhaustive. Certainly there would be other outputs, but these are some of the some interesting ones and key elements that you should consider. So there's a desired state, right? That data pipeline architecture that is what you believe will support the end states of data that are needed for your organization to successfully support its business strategy and go into the market and win. Certainly, you are going to need some technology recommendations as part of that, even if that is to continue using the technology that you have available to you already in your organization. But technology recommendations to address how to move data into those end states are critical. And then, of course, a roadmap or implementation plan is a key part of the outputs that you're going to look to develop during this strategy exercise. In order to do this, there's always going to be some level of cost, whether that's internal or external cost, and developing budget and getting approval for that is critical. And as we mentioned, people and culture on the input side, organizational change will be inevitable as an organization matures their data pipeline strategy. And so it's important to have an organizational change plan, whether that's training, education around tools, whether that's tools specifically designed to document and share information throughout the organization and teaching people how to use that, whether that's developing data stewards. There's a whole slew of things that could fall into organizational change in and around data pipelines. So this process, these inputs, these outputs, they represent what we at Technion do when we go through our strategic data assessment process, but they also represent what any organization could leverage in order to develop their own data pipeline strategy. So as I mentioned in these inputs, we've talked about business strategy. I want to spend a little bit of time on the next two items, on your data inputs and sources, and then on the uses of data, kind of speaking to end state and how folks use them, before we dive into thinking about architectures and what works. Then we'll be able to flesh out on each architecture how laws and regulations and people and culture really kind of interact with each potential architecture. So let's think about the data inputs and sources that are out there in our world today and that companies are dealing with on a daily basis. Two really key kind of slices of this are important to think about. One would be the nature of the data, right? Is it structured, semi-structured, or unstructured data? And, structured is what many of you are probably most familiar with. That is, rows and columns of data. It has metadata attached to each column, and it's easily brought into a database structure, and we can we all are familiar with the ability to run a SQL query on a table of data or something like that. It's very easy to work with typically. Semi-structured data is what we have a torrent of coming from everything that has to do with the internet and web-based applications and social media and things like that. And that is data that comes in the form of maybe a JSON object, a JSON file. And it's not completely unstructured. It has built into it the structure for the data, but it is not all the same structure. In other words, a given file or document there could contain many different types of structures, and so it doesn't fall into that neat and tidy structured format. And then you have unstructured data, and this would be truly things that are you're not going to turn into rows and columns ever. You're not going to they don't contain necessarily that structure built into them, and so you're going to have many types of documents or images or videos or audio, these larger file formats that come into that type of area. And so it's very important as you develop a data pipeline strategy to understand in your organization which of these types of data, the nature of your data, do you have to deal with, and what do you expect to deal with in the future? When it comes to sources of data, this also is impactful, right? Are we talking about transactional data, right? And usually transactional data is coming in the form of structured data. It certainly can come in the form of semi-structured data, and oftentimes, especially in today's world where we access much of our data through APIs or connections that are brokered, not through a direct query, many of the transmission formats of this transaction data could be in semi-structured form as well. But usually those transactions can easily be turned back into structured data if that is the case. We also have an increasing and very rapidly growing world of machines and sensors producing data in a constant stream. And so the volume of this is very large. A lot of it could be structured. Certainly a lot of it is also semi-structured. And then many of these sensors are going to provide additional information beyond structured and semi-structured that could be unstructured. So you could have images or audio or video that may be coming from these machines and sensors. And then our daily life is producing a massive amount of social data. And so this would be about interactions on the internet, people and organizations, video, images, all of those kinds of things, and the relationships that go with them. And that really covers structured, semi-structured, and unstructured, although most of it is probably in the semi-structured and unstructured. And then you have documents, which really sometimes there could be little snippets of structure in them, but really they more fall into unstructured data. So we're going to come back to this, and you'll hear me reference some of these data formats, the nature of data, the sources of data, as we talk about specific data pipeline architectures and how you should consider them and think about where the impact of the type of data you have has on what data pipeline architecture you should choose for your organization. So when you've heard me use the term end state, and I want to make sure that I address what that is. So that is the format, the storage location, and the access method through which data is directly accessed to provide for an organization, to provide value for an organization. So this is really where we want to get the data to in order for it to provide the value. Another way of saying that. So just some example end states, because largely the end state could be any end state, but you know, I'm going to use the term data warehouse, and that's largely a catch-all term that has a long history, and I don't want to try to change that history or give it a new meaning. But the place where an organization goes to get their data for reporting purposes, I'm going to use that as the data warehouse. You're going to hear the term data vault today, and a data vault is a newer concept. It's not new by any stretch of imagination, but it's newer than some of these other concepts, and it is where it is a database structure and a process for bringing data into that database structure that is designed for the very highest volumes and performance and speed of data in a very governed and pattern-based world. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Today is not a primer on Data Vault, but you're going to hear it mentioned. Certainly what we're used to in a lot of organizations is having a data mart or a cube where we go to query data from. In many organizations, there's an operational data store where we kind of dump that business data. We don't do a lot of transformation to it. We make it available to people and they can go query it. It's kind of the access to the business systems without really going directly to the system, because we don't want our users to connect to that. And then you have this very prevalent term today, and that is data lake. And I want to clarify what I mean by this, because I don't mean explicitly what has been the concept of big data or only unstructured data or something like that. I'm using the concept of data lake in more of a conceptual way, and that is a place where we can put data in either its raw form or for long-term storage of some kind. So it could very well be a database. It could be a Hadoop file store. It could be even your cloud storage locations where you're going to put files or blob stores, that type of thing. So lots of things in data lake, but largely I'm going to use it conceptually as a term where we can put raw data without transforming it and making it available for people to access. So while we've talked about end states and some examples of those, let's talk just about some uses of data and think about how those would relate to different end states. And so what types of uses of data you have in your organization will then inform which type of end states may be most applicable to have in your data pipeline strategy, because of how your users need to or want to or should access data. And so you have things like business reports and analytics. You have things like ad hoc user queries. You have historical reference data. You may need data that is great for audit and compliance. You may have a strong data science community needing to access data. Each of those is going to have a format, a structure, and some requirements that may be better served by one or more of these end states than others. And so those are going to be important to consider as we put together a data pipeline strategy that meets your organization's specific needs. All right, so let's shift to thinking about some specific architectures and thinking about how those will create value. And this is just the start of a conversation. So if there's any questions you have, we are going to have Q&A at the end. You'll be putting those questions in through the question panel on GoToWebinar. but if you want to have a further dialogue, I'd be delighted to do that later on. So this is just the start. I think there's three kind of classes of architectures that we have found to be successful in our experience implementing data pipelines for organizations. So I'm going to give them some names, and these are hopefully a little bit fun, but helpful for you to think about them in your mind. So I'm gonna name classic Kimball, agility and access, and speed and accuracy. And so we're going to kind of pull back the covers. I like the cars and the trucks because I think they give you a sense of a little bit. And as we talk more about what each of these represents, I think they'll make sense for you. So hold this thought, and then we'll circle back, and hopefully this was a helpful image to get you thinking. So classic Kimball. This is your data warehouse centric architecture. And so I'm going to use that kind of classic data warehouse term, right? The place where the business goes to run their queries and get answers to business questions, right? I think the core belief around this type of data pipeline strategy is that data should be modeled in a way that makes it easy for business users to interact with. And so you see on the diagram the conform dimensions. That's the concept of bringing together data from across your business sources, your data sources, and bringing it together into kind of one version of, let's say a customer, right? So that wherever we're using customer, we can all talk about the same customer. And that lets us relate data across different business units in the organization. Wherever customer is, we can use the same definition of customer. This approach is a good model, and with a good model in place, will let business users answer a very wide variety of questions with minimal effort. Okay, the model has to be very good though, in order to support that. If you are not able to conform dimensions across your organization very well, it will lead to significant silos within the data warehouse where data elements do not interact well and do not you don't get the benefits that you're looking for in this strategy. If you have source systems that are constantly changing quickly, getting new sources, adding on new systems or mergers and acquisitions, those sorts of things, the strategy starts to get brittle in those kinds of scenarios. It takes a bit longer to achieve the conforming that you want. We see this approach a lot in legacy data warehouse implementation, and I think it can still be a very strong option for those mid-sized organizations that can achieve conforming of information, but where they do have strong departmental reporting needs that lend themselves to this subject area oriented kinds of an approach. But you also don't want it to be as fast of a changing environment as some of the options will support. So, and then one note as we move on to the next architecture, what you'll see is that you could layer in the data warehouse, the conform dimensions, the subject areas, that approach into these other data pipeline strategies and architectures as a complementary approach as well. So what you're going to see today is I've picked three kind of distinct approaches, but they can really begin to work together, and that's going to be the beauty about developing a strategy that lets you grow with your data architecture. So let's move on to agility and access. So remember the image, the previous one was the pickup truck, kind of the classic, workhorse. This one is more, think your Jeep, right? So a Jeep is very agile. You can go anywhere, but you kind of go there at your own risk, right? And so this is a data lake centric approach, and a data lake centric architecture. And so to kind of unpack the diagram a little bit, you've got the idea of your data sources, and we've inserted a new box in here, and that is this data loading, streaming, and replication. And so this is the concept that largely we believe that data should be accessible to those who need it. And instead of waiting for when someone asks for data to put it into the data lake, as an organization, we begin to build patterns where whenever a new data source is identified, as part of that data source being brought into our organization, whether that's a business system or a tool we're using on the web, part of that project is to make the data available in the data lake so that it can easily be integrated with other data as we move forward. And so we have this dedicated function of loading the data into the data lake. Certainly, you're going to have governed processes that take data from the data lake and move it into data marts. It could certainly be archived back into data marts. I don't have an arrow for that on the picture here. But one of the primary functions of the data lake is that consumers can go to the data lake and begin to ask their own questions. And so you hear the term lakeshore analytics or something like that. Well, let's, again, the core belief here is data should be accessible to those who need it. Let's think a little bit about what is required to make this successful. We have to have a strong and technical user community that can self-serve from raw data and begin to develop their own requirements for how they want to use that data going forward, so that maybe it could be brought into a data mart or into some more governed process. Certainly a very important aspect of this would be the right tools for those users to have, whether that's for data prep, data discovery. Certainly also on the loading side, you need to have that process be efficient and have good tools to load data. Let's think about what will make this strategy fail. I think probably the biggest risk is that data lake turns into more of a swamp where you can't find anything because it's murky. No one trusts the quality of anything in the data lake, and folks, might as well not have access because they're not using it. And so I think the most relevant thing that you can do to address that would be to have some sort of a data catalog that ensures that people have access to that. So if you don't have that, that would be a large risk in my mind. We see this happening a lot in startups, organizations that are moving quickly. There's a lot of agility in this approach, right? Just put the data in the data lake. We'll begin to figure out what we need to do with it as we have those questions come up. And if we need to, we will put some governance around key elements of that data in order to make it usable by broader audiences of the organization in form of data marts. All right, so let's move on to speed and accuracy. So if the previous one was a Jeep, this is your race car. So this is our data vault-centric data pipeline architecture. And in this, what you're going to see as compared to the previous slide is that between the data lake and your data marts and your consumer access, we've really added in a layer, the data vault. And so it's important to explain just a little bit about what makes a data vault different, right? So a data vault is a combination of some modeling techniques around how to handle business keys and all the relationships that come in your data, while also maintaining complete auditability of the data by tracking every single change that happens as it comes in. And it's the combination of those modeling approaches with the processes, and both from a technology standpoint and a people standpoint, that enable an organization to operate in an agile way around their data infrastructure and building out the vault, ingesting new data sources, and adapting to change in the data sources. And so it's a holistic approach. It's not just a modeling technique. The core belief in the data vault architecture is that a resilient, rule and pattern-based data infrastructure will allow us to meet always changing business requirements while satisfying regulation and audit requirements. So I've mentioned some of the benefits. A few other benefits, I think, of a data vault that aren't so obvious, right? You have, because you track every change in the data, you can always go back and refer to at what point in time did the data show this, and have 100% auditability in that. You can also, because you're tracking all the relationships in the data, you can actually reproduce a source model by querying it out of the data vault. That can be something that you can test. One of the huge benefits, and you'll see this when we get into some of the use cases, and where we see this is Data Vault can handle parallel processing of ingestion of data, because it's not limited by some of the approaches that are typical in, let's say, like your classic Kimball data warehouse, where you have to look up your surrogate keys and things like that. So the approach of Data Vault, the way it handles business keys and the definition of business keys, allows you to process data in parallel whenever it arrives, and handle that very gracefully. So what will make this approach successful? Certainly you have to have strong technical data warehouse expertise. I would not approach this strategy without automation on my side. I think it's a key to making Data Vault successful. And I think you'll be likely to fail if your approach to Data Vault is to think that it's just about the model. If I just do the model right, then everything will work out. And you really need to understand those processes from both a technology and a people perspective that enable the Data Vault model to be a success. And then a really critical success factor or potential pitfall would be not to create the business-friendly access layer. The Data Vault serves to store the data, to retain the data, and but it is not the way that business users are going to access it. So it's imperative to build those access layers, whether they are virtual access layers through view layers, or whether they're physical in the form of some sort of dimensional data mark that makes the data easy to access. We see this approach growing in popularity very rapidly in the banking, insurance, financial services world because of the specific regulations there. It's also very popular in other regulated industries like healthcare. We see some of the companies with the most significant streaming requirements of continuous data processing implementing Data Vault because of the architecture and approach. And another key strength is when you want to leverage and manage data across structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data types. The Data Vault approach to business hash keys that allows you to use keys no matter where you have the data allows you to have a very hybrid approach that works very well. So those are three data architectures that can be complementary. As you can imagine, the Kimball model could be used more for your data marts, in any one of these two. And certainly you could start with a data lake approach and then grow into a data vault or adding a Kimball layer on top of it. So what I want to go back to is just to review where we've come from. We've talked about the inputs and developing your data pipeline strategy, and the outputs. We've reviewed a few of those architectures that might be an option. And I want to reiterate the process in the middle that you go through in order to develop your own data pipeline strategy is something that, if you are looking for a partner to help you develop that, we would like to say we are here to be a sounding board. If you felt like a formal process would be valuable in your organization to really do that discovery work and do the digesting and analyzing, Technion strategic data assessment could be a really good fit for you. So we would be happy to have that conversation. In the email follow-up that you will be receiving to attending the webinar and registering for the webinar, there will be a link to the video that you can share with others. But there will also be an opportunity in the email to respond, and if you would like to set up a meeting, even if it's just to ask questions and understand more of what we mean, or dig into any of the details that you've heard here today, I would be more than happy to take that call and jump on the phone with you. So just to reiterate, we are going to have several follow-up webinars. I mentioned those already. They are on our website, so you will be able to follow along there. Hopefully you have subscribed. So we are going to move into Q&A, and hopefully you all can hear me all right. And if you have questions and want to post them through the GoToWebinar questions panel, I would be happy to take a few of those, and then we'll wrap up at 1 o'clock. All right, it looks like we're not, no one has any questions. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we will be sharing out the recording for you to review. And if any questions come up, you've got my contact information right there. You're welcome to shoot me an email or call or text. So would look forward to hearing from you. All right. Thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your week.